Show recording begins right now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to We Plus You, straight talk about conscious business collaboration. Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Zanotti, and right next to me, not very far away, is Carly Alyssa Thorne. Hey, Carly, how are you today?
I'm doing great, and I'm really thrilled to have our guest on today, Percy von... See, I'm not going to say it because I see your middle name now, so I'm going to let you do this one now. I'm kidding. Percy Lipinski. And what I love about having him on today is the fact that he is an ex-ICNN reporter, and he is an explorer and an adventurer, and he's had some really great experiences traveling the world, if you will. And I can't wait to discuss the topics of media, social media, and ethics. So thank you so much for joining us, Percy.
Hi, Percy. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you, Carly. Thank you, Rick. Nice to be here. I'm a little bit further away than sitting right next to you, but I'm enjoying some nice weather as I look out the backyard here.
You're in Canada, right?
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver.
Oh, I love Vancouver. Favorite city.
Yeah.
Gorgeous place.
Yeah, thank you.
Hard to beat.
Hey, Percy, where does that middle name come from? Because now that I'm looking at this, I'm going, I saw your initial Skype name, and I'm going, what happened to regular Percy Lipinski? Then I'm saying Percy von Lipinski.
Regular Percy Lipinski is still here. He's always been here. It's Von is a title that goes back hundreds of years, I guess, in Germany, and it just really all it means is from, because in the old days you had a lot of people with just a first name, so you'd have before long there were thousands of Smiths because everybody was a blacksmith somewhere, and to designate who they were, and really more for tax collection purposes than anything else, they started putting on, and I'm talking about Germany now in this case, they put down, that's the Smith from the Lipinski area, which happens to mean the place with the big trees, right? So Von just simply means from, and then it evolved into a bit of royalty. But if there's any royalty in me, then I think they spent all the money, because I certainly never saw a dime of it.
So you know what our topic is today. I really want you to actually, can you tell everybody the actual title of your last blog post that you did? And then I'd really like for you to share a little bit of your backstory of how you became an ICNN reporter, and what does ICNN mean versus CNN, and because most people have no clue what the terminology difference is, and what your role is and what you did.
Sure. Okay. So CNN, I report as a... and I have to say, I've always felt uncomfortable with the word citizen journalist platform. We'll come to that a little bit later, but by definition, it's a citizen journalist platform. People with no particular training, with maybe a particular bias, all the things that you can't really do to call yourself a professional journalist, are invited to participate online with CNN. The catch there is, and it's a pretty big catch, is that if you do a particularly good story, and I know you're going to want to ask me, well, what makes a good story? And it doesn't necessarily mean good journalism, as we'll see in a few minutes here. You can enjoy the fame, and no fortune though, the fame of being on air at CNN, and increasingly amounts of time. I mean, if you start doing a really good story, you could find yourself with a show for a half an hour, like I did with myself over the years on Saturday mornings, or Saturday and Sunday mornings, featuring some of my iReports.
So can you actually go into a little bit further than that? Because I really want, like, for me, when I see ICNN, I always think of internet. So it's kind of like for, versus the people that are at CNN who are actually on the paid, like you said, you don't make money from that. So I don't think a lot of people understand that CNN people there's a paid payroll, and then what you guys were doing as the people that go out and explore and do some of the journalism from that point of view, it's a non-paid platform. And go a little more into how they do pay you, in essence, through perks or whatever.
That's it's a very first, it's a very rare situation. Let me say that, because there are certain. I mean, there's no need for yet another video platform. There's tons of them already. YouTube, Vimeo, all kinds of blip TV. I mean, I guess I could go on and on and on. And, to that degree, CNN iReport is another one of those. The only difference is that CNN is the only one that lends their name to that platform. And that's a name with a whole lot of history and a whole lot of credibility behind it. Because when some people would argue differently, of course, they'd say, well, it doesn't mean anything unless it comes out of Fox or MSNBC or CBS or PBS. But CNN is one of those. And when you have a story and it appears alongside CNN, we can surmise that it has a lot more credibility, even if it is on a internet platform. So what they started to do when iReport started back in 2008, they had a very strong relationship with CNN on the broadcast side. So the CNN that you're familiar with on TV, with whoever, the Anderson Cooper or Larry King or whoever that you'd see on the news, and you could just as likely see a story by a CNN iReporter that has been picked as the story of the day because somebody's got unusual footage of the riots going on in Turkey. It's not possible with any news organization to have feet on the ground everywhere all the time. Early on in the history of iReport, within the first year, there was a problem. Somebody at iReport had reported the premature death of Steve Jobs. And that went out as a story that somebody had created. This is a legendary story at iReport. That story went out as a CNN story. They grabbed it for CNN broadcast. CNN stock promptly tanked. The SEC, and of course Steve Jobs had not died at that time. He did die eventually, but not when that story came out. It was a huge scandal. And the problem was that the stock plunged as a result. The SEC got involved, and CNN, frankly, almost lost their license over it because they let that story go to air. So changes were made in the iReport, the citizen journalism platform after that, and no longer could you just do a story, have it on CNN, and then perhaps have it on CNN broadcast. It had to go through a very crucial process called the vetting process, and that meant that a CNN producer would review the story, and if they thought it was going to be worthy, then they would call you and ask you a whole bunch of questions and write a letter and explain how you did it, where you did it, research it, make sure that it's factually accurate, and then it would sit in the pool with all the other vetted iReports for possible use in a broadcast.
Well, actually, that seems to be a popular trend also with the fast turnaround times on with journalists right now, is that they're not vetting like they used to. Got to get it up there. It's only a 24-hour news cycle. Got to get it up. And I mean, look what happened to Dan Rather after how many years of a successful career? He blew it on the Bush interview, and all of a sudden it all went down the drain for him.
And that just goes to show you how important it is to have a strong vetting system.
Yeah.
CNN does have a very strong vetting system because they learned their lesson after that. If we go back to when... if you recall when President Obama had an announcement to make that there was going to be something big happening. It happened to be the night when they knocked off Osama bin Laden. And they basically did something that the White House rarely ever does. Came on and said, hey, the president's going to come out and talk, make yourself available at 8 o'clock. And with that just never happens with the president of the United States. It's so rare. So they... Immediately, everybody's goes into speculation mode, and all the major networks all started their machines going. So, well, it's by the time it got to like 5 minutes to 8, there was just like a panic, and the networks were just going crazy trying to pre-guess them and be the first one. Nobody had guessed that the announcement was going to be that they took out Osama bin Laden. Most of them had thought it was Muammar Gaddafi, or that the United States was going to invade, Pakistan or Afghanistan in the north or something, or there was a big invasion going on somewhere. Not one network got it right. And CNN, to its credit, said that we are not going to engage in speculation, and anybody that does is just lying to you. So we're not going to tell you until 1 minute after 8, and because that's when we'll know. We will not know before that. Anybody that tells you they do is lying. And there's a lot of money to be had by being the first one to get a story. to get it right. So usually, in the case of CNN, I can speak as I spent a lot of time there. They'll take the high road and say, you know what, we're just not going to speculate. We just do not know. We're not going to tell anybody until we do know, and then we'll say.
So speaking of that, when you're talking about vetting, that's one of the things that I really do want to talk about in terms of ethics and social media and journalism and media in general, is you and I have had conversations going back and forth, and what you wrote your blog post about is it is true that most people do not vet enough. They don't check. It's the same thing I tell people over and over again, even within social media, when people just friend people blindly or they follow people on Twitter blindly. They're not even doing their own vetting, yet alone when it's something really important, they're not doing their vetting. And I get paid to do that. I have clients that actually pay me monthly. Just my job is to vet out like all these different things, and it's such a crucial, important ethics piece. So I'd really love for you to actually address a little bit of the actual last blog you wrote, where there was that kind of ICNN reporter who was buying fake followers, and what happened with all that.
Okay, well let's take a look at what happens at CNN. That still happens today when you do a story. So millions of stories are sitting there on iReport. Millions of them go nowhere. They get 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 views or something, just basically another thing like a YouTube. Somebody's got an opinion, somebody shoots a story, cat up in the tree, whatever, right? And as long as it's not offensive, it stays online and it doesn't get any attention. But if we look at the label that says vetted, that's when you see the little CNN logo, and at that point the CNN logo is attached to the story. That means the story is cleared for broadcast. All systems are go. And about 1% of the stories that are submitted, I don't know the numbers, but because obviously it varies depending on if there's a major event going on, or riots in Turkey, things like that. But it's this very small number are vetted. And as I said before, vetting means that somebody's at CNN and it's a qualified somebody that's a journalist, a professional journalist, has done all the things that journalists are supposed to do to make sure that all the facts are accurate, that you've got all the details in there. And other things like you haven't been paid to tell the story. This is not an underground commercial for somebody. You're not trying to, you haven't paid somebody for the story, or somebody hasn't paid you for the story. Those are all questions that are asked. And you have to write a letter back to saying, what you've done. So you're clear on the vetting process, right?
Yeah, meaning it's a real journalist story.
Okay. So, and most importantly there, no money's changed hands. Okay, that's an important part of what all this is happening. So then you ask yourself, well, if your story is vetted, there are better reporters than others. In the old days, we used to have a name for them. The CNN used to call the people that were the best reporters, they called them superstars. It's a little bit of an embarrassing term, but that was their choice. And so there were about 50, 60 of us out of probably hundreds of thousands that were considered superstar reporters. In other words, they generally knew that our story was factual, that it was interesting, that it was put together professionally, and that we did a good story that was they could run with for the most part. So it wasn't long in that business of doing CNNI reports before you would start to notice that if you did a good story that had good content and interest, you would get vetted more likely. And then it wasn't too much of a stretch to go from there and notice that suddenly PR firms would start knocking on your doors. You'd get PR firms saying, hey, we've got a international wine tasting going on at someplace in Hollywood, or in my case, someplace in Vancouver. And then it became some wine tasting in Paris. And then it became some wine tasting in, Russia, or a vodka contest, or, you name it. I mean, and, these are interesting places. They're interesting locations. I like to travel. I sold my business, so it's not like I need to make money to make a daily living. I don't have to pay rent. I own my property. So, somebody throws me a free trip to, Egypt to go look at some pyramids, I'm probably going to take them up on it, right? And I'm not the only one. Lots of other people. Everything worked well. The stories would get vetted and then featured on CNN. And CNN loved it because they would get these great stories from around the world with and we could also say movie stars. In other words, celebrities and things like that would all buy access because of the vetting and the number of views that you would get on the iReport system. So it was everybody was happy until we found out what was going on a little later on, of course. But is that part all clear? Like one hand shakes the other. You've got more views coming in. You've got more traffic. CNN's happy. They can advertise more. The reporter themselves happy because they're getting lots of views and they're getting invitations. They're starting to have to say, no, I can't do that. I'm too busy. So you can see when it's working, it works really well.
And exactly, and this is where I want to go, why I mentioned the word ethics in there. Because what people don't get, what you're going to start talking about is, it's not just that people bought fake followers to get views. It's the fact that then you got PR companies and other companies, marketing companies have come in and have donated all this wealth of perks that does boil down to money, and it's not even real because the views aren't even real. And so there's where the integrity piece comes into play. So can you actually talk about that?
Yeah, first of all, let's be clear about one thing. When that happened, it happened over the course of 3 or 4 years, culminating in my discovery of it a year ago, almost to the day. Okay, so it had already been happening for 3 or 4 years. I don't even know if companies like Clout were around 3 or 4 years ago. Apparently, gamification is what you're calling it, or buying views on YouTube and iReport were, because that's how long it had been going on for. And so, what happens, Carly and Rick, is that if you start to look at the stories you do and the types and the amounts of views you get, you'll attract a lot of attention, because if whether you're talking about a celebrity or a destination or a hotel or just any kind of a product, I mean, people ultimately still pay attention to the amount of attention that thing, person, location gets based on how many views they see on a thing like, well, in my case, iReport or YouTube or Vimeo or any of those. What we've learned a few years ago is that, guess what? It's possible to fake all that. And it's taken a little bit of time for the companies that are responsible for getting the publicity for these goods and people and services and celebrity to realize, hey, wait a minute, this might not actually be real. It could all be fake, in which case we're spending all this money on flying people out and sending them to restaurants, giving them access to Angelina Jolie, and it's all for nothing. Now, some people would say, well, I'm not going to do that. I would never do that. But some people would look at a free trip to, have a safari in Africa, for example, and go, hey, you know what? For that kind of stuff, I'm in for a little bit gamification. But I think the PR companies and the people that handle this kind of stuff for celebrities and companies and destinations, tourism boards, are a lot smarter today than they were, say, a year ago when this happened when I noticed it happening at CNN. And I wrote this article recently for All Voices as a response to that, to say, okay, there's a formal story out there that people can read and they can see how the process worked. Who the benefactors were, who was at risk. You mentioned, Carly, for example, charities. They're a terrible target for this kind of stuff because they're operating with limited resources to begin with. They're counting on certain, social media sites like Facebook and iReport and all these places to create compelling video stories or blog posts about their particular need or their particular desire to either raise money or to draw attention to something. And, their resources are the ultimate and limited. They only have so much available. And if it's being distracted by someone that's scamming them, that's sad. It's a sad story. So what we need to do is to try and figure out ways to educate the people that are responsible for awarding these, I guess we can call them perks.
Well, also one of the things sort of interesting, anybody who knows anything about green screening or knows about how video is shot sees how much BS goes on in the news industry with, they're in front of some war zone and they're actually at a studio somewhere. You could see the lines around their shoulders.
Yeah.
And you just
Let's just talk about that quick. For everybody that's watching or listening to this right now, okay? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna give everybody in the world a great big tip, okay? Green screening is it's actually surprisingly pretty cheesy. It's not very good. It's not perfect. So whenever you're looking at an interview, I'm challenging everybody to look for the green in the hair.
Yeah.
And if you do, you can bet that's what's happening. A person sitting in a green room, they're not anywhere near where they look like they are. Typically,
no, and in particular blondes, you can really see the green coming out of the blondes.
It's so easy when you're looking for it. It's pretty good, but it's pretty hard to hide on a broadcast TV set. So
the other trick is lighting, where the real lighting is a little dimmer, and then you're lit much more differently because the green screen requires a different kind of lighting. So it's real interesting. So I find it interesting how a lot of the news agencies are constantly pushing the ethics of being real and really forcing a lot of reporters into that when in reality a lot of it is practiced that isn't real. I remember I was a journalism major for a while and just used to go, no, that's not right. It's just...
and I think that's. I thought about this a lot before this interview today, Rick. I have to be honest with you. I had to spend a lot of time on the highway today, and since we're not allowed to talk on the phones anymore on the road, I get time to think. And I was thinking about this quite a bit, and I thought, first of all, let's take the two words social media. I'm really comfortable with the word social because we are ultimately human beings. That's who we are. We're social. In fact, we're so social that to punish human beings, if they've done something really bad, we put them in isolation. We jail them and we put them in solitary confinement. That's how we punish people. It's the worst thing next to death. So, by nature, we're very social creatures. And I think the television business figured that out long ago. It's not just with green screening in the news. It goes back to the first days of TV. If we go back to the 1950s, we had a laugh track inserted on just about every sitcom that ever came out because it wasn't long when TV was out before they figured out, hey, you know what? This joke isn't working very well, but we still got to keep people entertained. What are we going to do? And somebody somewhere figured out, throw a laugh track in and everybody will laugh.
Right.
And we've been listening to laugh tracks ever since. So is that fake? I mean, it's...
Yeah, it's fake. I mean, in essence, if you listen to a lot of news reports, especially from the war zone, they're shot for real, and then they're embellished with extra machine gun fire, extra explosions. And the funny thing is, you listen to enough of it, you can recognize what tracks they're using.
Guilty is charged.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Done it. We had a situation where the Olympics were here a years ago in Vancouver. I'll let you and your guest decide if I did the right thing or not. And these things happen all the time. Look, a qualified professional journalist has lines they will not cross, and or else they'll lose their job. Dan Rather, right? So that's the difference with, say, social media or citizen journalism or whatever we're going to call it. But I'll just use one quick example. When we had the Olympics, there were exercises for anti-terrorism efforts, and so I went out to film this story. It would have been awesome. It was an awesome story. I mean, you got ambulances everywhere, you got people laying on the ground with blood, fake blood and explosions going off, but they had to do it in a residential neighborhood. They didn't want to use real sirens on, the whole neighborhood would have to shut down. So they had everything but the noise. They didn't put the sirens on, they didn't fire off the explosives. So there I was trying to do this story, and there was no noise. You just had the lights flashing, but no noise, and trying to show that it was a simulated, fire drill and ambulances running all over the place. So I got some canned ambulance sirens and fire things and put them in. I told CNN that I was going to do that, and they were fine with it, and that's how we ran the story. And we did not put on the block.
And that one I don't see as that bad because, frankly, that's not really not an embellishment. That's just like you had a mute track and you just added a track to it.
There's different ways of editing. I mean, sometimes, when you're editing and something isn't right, you're going to fix the editing. It's one thing to manufacture and twist or change a story.
Right.
It's another thing that you're adding, and we all know, because we all edit, we all done videography. We've all been, behind in front of the camera. So we get that there's a difference. And that's where the integrity piece comes in and the ethics comes in. It's like, are you completely changing something that is so much not what it is and you're manufacturing it? Or are you actually adding music to a track?
And unfortunately, that's part of what happens with citizen journalism. That's why I don't like that word. I'm not even big on social media, to be honest with you. I like the social part. I don't like the media part because at my age, and probably your ages as well, media represents typically some big corporate entity. I know for younger people, like my daughter, as she's 10, as she gets older, she'll go look at media. Media is TV, it's computer, it's, Xbox games, it's all media, right? But for us, media, when I hear the word media, I think of CNN, I think of Hollywood, I think of Sony Pictures, I think of Hearst, magazines, I think of Reuters. That's media for me, right? And when you put that together with social media, I think that's misleading. I think it should be something more like social bandwidth, because there's still a big wall between professional media companies, CNN, let's say, and the rest of the world in social media. There's a big wall, and and ultimately, when you look at these big networks, what they do is curate the news, and you depend on them, and that's what you're talking about. You depend on them to curate that news accurately and profile it for you. That's why people choose to pay money to get their news stories from a news outlet like CNN or MSNBC. You're counting it. So when that fails us, we get really upset because we've paid money to get good, strong, solid journalism, and it hasn't happened. And that's the essence of what happened in the CNNI report. When CNN puts their stamp on a story, you have to assume that it's got integrity, that it's real. They've researched the facts. When it turns out they haven't, and they haven't done it for many years, and in fact they're encouraging it, that's a real big disappointment, and I think a big mistake on their part.
And I think one of the big problems right now with the media is that we now have the government involved, and it's been going on for a long time, but it's, I think, even more prevalent right now, government involved in creating stories, manipulating stories.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where the ethics just go completely out the door, because now nobody's reporting what's really happening. It's whatever is conveniently reported. And it doesn't matter what party, they're all the same. They're all doing the same thing in different ways. So that's well, actually, look at the ratings of most network news, and even the cable news is starting to really go down. People are getting wise. They're starting to kind of figure it out.
I think you nailed it right on the head, Rick. I think, we're going through a process of change, and I think we're all starting to grow up and realize we have to be our own curators, our own filter. We can't depend on anybody anymore but ourselves to make sense of a story. And I guess the good news is we have lots of sources to be able to compare notes and verify and check everything. But the bad news is we, don't have a lot of ways to weigh out each individual story and test its credibility. Right. We have to use some common sense, of course. You pointed out this fellow on iReport with 651,000 Twitter followers. I think that's a good clue to me that I wouldn't trust much coming out of that guy, because I don't even think the Vice President of the United States comes close to 650,000.
No, I think it was a couple 100,000, if even.
There's some common sense.
Right, exactly, and that's one thing I do want to address, so people can get clear on this. When I see someone that's got 650,000 plus followers, yet they're only following 300, and they've only sent out like 6,000 tweets. Come on, wake up! Realize that if someone really had that many followers, they would actually following more than 300 people, and they sure as heck would be tweeted out more than 6,000 tweets. We need to actually start opening our eyes and actually doing our own vetting and use our common sense. When there's a bot. The other thing I want to address, because otherwise I'll forget, is you and I, Percy, because we put up I tweeted out and put your article all over, had one guy that came on our conversation, and there's one thing I do want to address in that conversation that went on that wall was, I think a lot of people don't know the difference, or they actually misuse the difference. It's a very different story to buy leads for something. So I really wanted to make that distinction for the audience, because I know that was brought up a lot all over the place when people see fake followers. Let's actually talk about the difference between buying fake followers and buying leads in a company. I mean, it's like apples and oranges, but for some, it's like, well, that's no different. Well, it is. It's very different.
Well, there are different reasons for that people buy fake followers, or everybody buys leads for one purpose, and that is to do business. They're trying to find somebody to buy their product, whether it's an email spam list, which is, there's a reason the government stepped in and made those illegal and made it punishable, because people are just sick and tired of getting unwanted junk mail. So the government and the citizens of the world said enough is enough, and they made it illegal to do that by way of heavy fines. I don't know about you, but for the most part, most of those junk emails are gone now. There's the odd one that slips through, but for the most part, they're gone. Same thing with the fake followers, although that's a little bit more benign, and I'm not sure that everybody that's buying fake followers is doing it to get business. The guy we're talking about on your Facebook page is suggesting it's the same thing as buying leads for marketing purposes. But I would argue completely different, because for one thing, when you're buying leads, the last thing you want to be doing is buying fake leads. You want real ones with real people answering their mail. Otherwise, you'd be pretty upset buying 100,000 telemarketing leads or leads only to find out that they're dead ends and there's nobody actually there and there isn't anybody there. So what other reasons, let's ask that question, what reasons would somebody have for buying fake followers like 650,000? Well, the first and most obvious reason, let me adjust my set there. Oops, keep slipping. There, how's that? The first and obvious one is probably narcissism. I mean, they want to feel self-important and have the world go, ooh, wow, look at me, I've got 650,000 Facebook followers or Twitter followers or whatever whatever it is, right? And of course, the irony there is that the very people that would appreciate anything like that would know right away they're fake, and they look even more stupid. So in some cases, that sort of punishes them on their own anyway. You don't really need to do anything to stop that. They already look like an idiot. And it's actually quite hard to get rid of fake followers, so they're going to be stuck with that for quite a long time, with people going there and immediately dismissing. But it does take long. The other reason is, this comes back to CNN again, the reason you might want to get a lot of fake followers is money in fake followers. And it's not good money, it's bad money. It's money that people are going to invest in you as either a charity or even a business or a tourist organization, hoping to get the attention that 650,000 Twitter followers is going to bring. But once again, once they find that out, as they have with Chris Morrow, say, for example, at CNN, they're not going to be doing business with them anymore, because they're going to realize that it's all fake and they're wasting their time and money, and they're kind of looking foolish themselves. I'm not sure, Carly, there's anything you can do other than trumpet by way of stories like the one we're doing today out there and saying, hey, it's out there. Social media professionals like both of you, have clients, you talk to them and say, you can tell them and educate them, and it's kind of one client at a time that we have to tell them, hey, look, these things happen. There's gaming going on. We don't do it. We don't recommend you do it. And by the way, there's a price to pay for gaming.
That's the biggest thing. I'm always hammering that home with my clients. It's like, is it worth it in the end? Because all laundry comes out in the wash. It does. Somewhere down the line, it's going to come up. Someone's going to figure out, and someone is going to write an article like you did. Someone is going to get burned. A lot of people did do it for the perks. But even the perk companies now, Clout and Cred and all these other monitoring, even in the social media world, they're even on to the people gaming the system. So it's like, I always tell people, is it really worth it? At the end of the day, is it worth ruining your brand? Is it worth ruining your reputation that?
Yeah, and also, all you have to do is, there's a lot of tools in Twitter and Facebook and everything else to actually look at who someone's followers are. And when you find out that 3/4 of them are from India in some village in the middle of nowhere, you kind of go, that doesn't sound right.
A lot of curry.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of curry.
I love that. That's a perfect line, Percy. A lot of curry.
That's a lot of curry.
And it's not anything against, India or Asia.
No, but that's where a lot of the users...
Any particular place. But like you said, if you see a person's got views or all their followers are from one specific area. And I actually did an experiment where we actually did buy views so we could actually track the source and see how it all went. We did an experiment in a special Facebook group. And what we found was we started getting people yelling us in the group saying, who put me in this group? I didn't ask to be in this group. Where did you get my name from? So just for people to actually see that a lot of these people that are on being added, all these fake followers, are people that their systems have been hacked into to get their names. Now, there are some legitimate ones where people pay to be in a pool. In other words, people pay, they pay people to use them as followers for people, and then then people pay them to add followers. And there are some, and that's part of the vetting. There are some legitimate sources if you find out exactly what you need and what specifically for. These are real people. These people are interested in what you're attempting to, whatever message it is that you have, whatever your passion is. And at the same time, a lot of people need to understand, a lot of people have been hacked and abused, and their information has been put in there completely against their will. And that's the other tricky part, because when you engage in that activity, you're also not just hurting yourself and your reputation, you're also hurting other people's.
Well, yeah, and when you're buying users, probably 80 or 90% don't even know they've been sold.
That's my point. Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. You're not just hurting yourself, you're also hurting other people. And so I just want everyone to, I just really would just really wake people up to being more authentic and more having more integrity and more ethics in their business. And to me, social media is a business. It's not just social media anymore, because when we use just the terminology of social media as, oh, it's just social media, so what? It's just a game. It doesn't mean anything. So what? It's not anymore. And we need to start taking our integrity that we use in our business and treat social media like a business and have the same ethics in that space, not just in our business world.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that happens at the individual level. Like each person handles that differently. And it's like in the real world. I mean, you have people that have no credibility and they're total losers, and you don't do any business with them, right? You stay away from that sort of stuff. And then social media, or social bandwidth, as I like to call it more often, is the same thing. I mean, there are people you want to associate with, and there are people you don't want to associate with, and there are people that are just transitory. You associate with them for a little while, and then you disassociate and you move on. I think the things that were a problem, for example, 3 or 4 years ago at CNN with iReport, are probably not as much a problem anymore, because we were able to have this conversation today and say, this guy's got let's name names. I mean, Charles Garcia, he's got 650,000 followers apparently on CNN iReport. Well, that tells me all I really need to know. There's not much likelihood I'm ever going to do business with him, just based on that alone, right? And same thing with Chris Morrow and all her, hundreds of thousands, well, in her case, millions upon millions of views on iReport. It was a surprise to me that CNN would let their name be dragged into this, and that's kind of the part that really I found quite disturbing. It doesn't surprise me that it happens at YouTube. I mean, I when I first learned that it was even possible to do this last year, at first I thought it was like a warehouse of people in Pakistan, that would click on the video. And I thought, well, that's pretty ingenious, And I was wondering, is that right or is it wrong? I'm picturing this warehouse of all these guys on their computers being paid to click on a video all day. And I'm going, I don't know, I guess that's wrong. I mean, they are technically watching it, but it's somebody in Pakistan,
Yep.
Then I find out, of course, that I'm a lot smarter now to know that that's not, in fact, what happens. It's all done through software, and there's nobody actually watching it. You could make a good argument for, well, is anybody really harmed by doing that? The guy, Charlie Garcia, looks like an idiot with his 650,000 Twitter followers. And the answer would be probably no. I mean, nobody's really harmed, except if Charlie or Chris or anybody else goes out and starts to say, look, I've got an audience of 650,000 Twitter followers. Give me some tickets.
Right.
I'll to villages in India and let me show you how to get some. That would be morally and ethically a big issue that I would have. And I'm hoping that agencies would be smart enough. Maybe, Carly, you'd be good enough with your professional work pro bono to do some charitable work in that way and say, hey,
I do. And we don't mean to rush you, but we actually are running out of time. So actually, I would like you to end us with one thing. And also, I want to clarify that the guy's name you mentioned, I don't think they were all specifically for ICNN. He does a lot of reporting. I don't want people thinking it's just related to ICNN. It's related to various platforms. However, what I'd like to end with, can you give us a short, pithy, because I never got to ask a question, one really exciting assignment that you had? We make it short so that we can conclude, so we don't drown people out with our wonderful conversation about ethics, which is a topic that a lot of people don't want to address, and I'm really happy and thrilled that you came on so that we could address it. But could you just please share with us one really fun adventure that you had?
Okay, well, when you do good stories and you do good work and it's entertaining, I've stayed away from most of the controversial things, so that I don't need to gamify anything, because I just do the kind of content that I like to watch. So the probably the best story I've ever done, the most exciting one I've ever done. I've done, I think, a few that are best. One even won the award, as CNN gave me an award for it, so I get to blow my horn a little bit. But the most fun I ever had to be just a month ago when I got to live with a a family of gorillas for a couple of days in Rwanda. And that just happened just over a month ago in Rwanda in Africa, of course. That was just, I mean, I had no idea that I would be actually in an 800-pound gorilla's living room with his wives and children and nephews and nieces running around in the jungles of Rwanda for a couple of days. So that was definitely a major highlight. And ditto for lemurs in Madagascar a few months before that, and also with polar bears and belugas a few months before that. So I've had some just amazing opportunities being a reporter and going out and being able to cover some stories, particularly ones in remote locations, Africa, places like that.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And I do want to give out a shout out to our mutual social media management friend, Miriam, because you and I both love her. And I work with her and you work with her. So I just want to give her a shout out and say hello because she was real excited about you coming on. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we love feedback. Anything you want to hear about or learn about, please feel free to email me or Rick and leave comments, and we will be doing a full blog post with all of Percy's information and where you can find him, and so you can actually go find out about his wonderful journeys and adventures. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Rick and Carly. You guys were great. Awesome. It was an awesome opportunity to share some stories and actually learn some things from you, and I look forward to doing it again sometime, part 2.
That sounds great. Well,
yeah, next part 2 will be No More Ethics. We're going to talk about some of your adventures. So I think that would be really cool to talk about some of your jungle adventures and with the gorillas and the penguins and some of those stories.
I want to know more about
that.
I want to know more about the monkey business. That sounds
fun. I know.
Okay, absolutely, no problem. Monkey business, it is monkey business.
All right, everyone have a wonderful
Percy,
day.
safe
and
travels.
I'll be talking to you soon, Percy.
Take care.
Safe travels, Percy. Have a good one. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.